Ladies and gentlemen, with all the NFL weather that's been talked about over the past week, I thought it would be a fun little idea to go back to some NFL regular season or playoff games that were canceled or postponed or moved or whatever due to weather circumstances. Also looking at some games that, were in multi-purpose stadiums that had to be moved because of MLB teams that made the playoffs, and there were some scheduling conflicts, and it creates a really interesting scenario, including the latest an NFL game has ever started. We're going to be talking about that at the end of the video, but beginning, I thought I would just do kind of recent times. So we're going to go back to 2005. I'm sure a lot of people remember Hurricane Katrina sweeping through New Orleans, Louisiana, and the Superdome. The NFL ended up having to move the New Orleans Saints' first home game to play on the road at the New York Giants Stadium. That was before MetLife was even around, and then they had to play at alternate sites for several other home games as the Superdome was being repaired. And you can take a look at the extensive damage that the Superdome suffered from. It is a dome stadium. You can see sun shining through it for really its only time in history. Now, the Saints had to play their home games at the Alamo Dome, which is located in San Antonio. It is home of the Alamo Bowl, the college football Alamo Bowl that's played at the end of every season, and also Tiger Stadium. Yes, LSU Tiger Stadium, one of the best college football stadiums. That's where they had to play. But their first game was moved, and they also had to move a lot of their other early season home games to alternate venues because of the damage that Hurricane Katrina caused to the Superdome at the time. Also in 2005, it was a rough hurricane season. The Chiefs were supposed to play a game at the Miami Dolphins. The NFL ended up moving up that matchup 2 days and playing that game on a Friday night. Yes, there was a Friday night game in 2005 because of another hurricane. Moving on to some snow events that either postponed, canceled, or moved games. Minnesota had a very bad snow in 2010, and the Metrodome's roof collapsed. Yes, that happened in 2010. On December 12th, which was a Sunday morning, with the Vikings scheduled to play the New York Giants later that day. Now, even before the stadium collapsed, the game was postponed until Monday night because officials were already concerned about the surrounding area, and they did play it a day later on Monday night. Of course, it wasn't at the Metrodome. It was at TCF Bank Stadium, which is home to the University of Minnesota. Very rare for Minnesota, the Vikings, to play an outdoor game. It is funny, when the Vikings were building their new stadium, they had to play 2 full years outdoors at that stadium. The University of Minnesota put that up in 2009, so it was pretty new when they were playing at it, but obviously it's not on NFL standard. But there was a game scheduled for Sunday afternoon in 2010. The roof collapses, it gets postponed to Monday night, and they relocate and have to play in the frigid cold of Minneapolis. The day after Christmas, later that year in 2010, December 26th, a Sunday night game between the Vikings and the Eagles had to be postponed to a Tuesday, 2 days later, the 28th, because of a snowstorm in and around the Philadelphia area. Very rare Tuesday night game. Of course, we saw another Tuesday night game during the pandemic season when they were moving all those games around, but that's just a very rare matchup in terms of that one. And then recently, back right before Thanksgiving in 2022, there was a crazy snowstorm in Buffalo, and they had to move the Browns-Bills game to Ford Field in Detroit, and there were a lot of Bills fans for that one. That was when the Browns were starting Jacoby Brissett, and they were kind of out of it in 2022. But yeah, that game ended up getting moved to Detroit, and Buffalo ended up playing back-to-back games at Ford Field. They hosted the Browns, and then they played on the road at Ford Field facing the Lions. A very rare scheduling quirk when it comes to something like that. And then speaking of the Buffalo Bills, it was just announced that their Sunday 1 o'clock afternoon game against the Steelers would be moved to Monday at 4:30. I do think this benefits the Bills, considering they've got a more explosive offense. The weather would likely hamper them a little bit more than it would the Pittsburgh Steelers, who want to kind of muck up the game, play a little bit lower scoring. But either way, a lot of people are wondering, this is multiple games in Buffalo now in a 2-year span that have been moved, canceled, postponed, whatever you want to call it. they're building a new stadium, and the new stadium is not going to have a roof. And the reason they said it wasn't going to have a roof is because they want to embrace the elements. But we've seen now, I will say, Buffalo, where it's located, where the stadium is, Orchard Park, it is right off of the lake. You get horrible lake effect snow. I think it's more so they're worried about people actually getting to the game. That's the bigger concern. But that is very disappointing that that game is getting canceled. It would have been really cool to see that tomorrow. I don't know if it would have been great in terms of the competitive aspect of it, but that was another, obviously, game that got postponed because of snow. And then there were also a few recent interesting schedule quirks in terms of shared venues having to move the start time of certain games because MLB teams, made the playoffs, and if they're sharing a stadium with an NFL team in September and into October, it becomes a big problem. Going back to 2013, the Oakland Athletics, they're a team that normally never makes the playoffs. They were in the ALDS, and it forced the Raiders to postpone a game that they had originally scheduled for 4:25 Eastern, which is your typical 4 o'clock window start, to 8:35 Pacific, meaning 11:35 Eastern Standard Time in 2013. I forgot this even happened, and I used to, I loved following the NFL in 2013, but yes, the Chargers and the Raiders played a game that started at 8:35 Pacific time. Normally when you're talking about NFL Monday night games or Sunday night games, if they're on the West Coast, they start, at 5 o'clock Pacific time. So it's normally light out. So for a game to start at 8:35 Pacific time, it's just so rare, which was 11:35 Eastern Standard Time, and the game did not end until well after 2 a.m. on the East Coast. All of that was because the Oakland Athletics had made the ALDS, and obviously the Oakland Coliseum, which at this point probably has about 4 or 5 years of life left, is a multi-purpose stadium and had to facilitate both of the games. And then you also had an almost schedule change in October of 2022 with the Seahawks possibly playing a home game against the Cardinals at 4:05 Eastern or 1:05 local time in Seattle at Lumen Field. If the Mariners would have beaten the Astros in their game 3 of their series because they were down 2-0, it would have forced a game 4, and the Mariners were going to play game 4 on Sunday at 12:07 local time. The Seahawks, remember, were scheduled to play at 1:05, so it would have been only a 1-hour difference, and they would have had to delay their kickoff until 2:30 in the afternoon Pacific time. So in October of 2022, the Seahawks almost hosted the Cardinals at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time on Sunday because of the Mariners almost winning, and I guess kind of a scheduling quirk in terms of that. Even though they don't share a stadium or anything like that, they play at different venues. Just kind of weird how that works out. I'm guessing it has to do with congestion downtown. You would think that both teams in Seattle would be able to play no problem, but either way, it ended up not mattering considering the Mariners lost and got swept by the Houston Astros, and the Seahawks game could be played on Sunday at 4:05 Eastern Time or 1:05 Pacific Time with no interruption. And then the final one I'm going to go over, this is more of a scheduling quirk. It's not a postponement or anything like that, but normally the team that wins the Super Bowl always starts at home the next year, preferably on Thursday night. And it was the Baltimore Ravens who beat the 49ers back in 2012. Joe Flacco, the pass to Jacoby Jones against the Broncos. They end up winning the Super Bowl. And they were supposed to open, you would think, but they started 2013 on the road at the Denver Broncos because of a scheduling conflict with the Baltimore Orioles. And that was the Thursday night opener, the game that the Ravens got absolutely destroyed by Peyton Manning. He threw like 6 touchdown passes, and they lost 49-27. But just a little fun fact there. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.